Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian oil refineries have led to a record surge in gasoline prices in Russia. On the exchange, as of August 20th, a ton of A95 was already 55% more expensive than at the beginning of the year. In August, at least 10 key Russian refineries were hit, according to calculations by CNN. But the Kremlin is sticking to its usual tried-and-true tactic: we don't know anything. The official version is that the shortage is supposedly due to increased consumption during the holiday season and minor logistical disruptions. The real reason, however, is something they prefer not to say out loud. How much has Russia lost because of the drone attacks? Let's break it down now. In this footage, published by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, a strike drone hits the Syzran oil refinery in the Samara region. The facility produces gasoline, diesel, aviation kerosene, and other petroleum products that are supplied directly to the Russian army. In other words, this is a site of strategic importance. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Syzran oil refinery is capable of processing up to 8.5 million tons of oil per year. In fact, that's about 3% of all oil refining in Russia. At the same time, the plant plays a key role in supplying fuel to the entire region. Its shutdown will inevitably lead to supply disruptions, price increases, and a greater shortage of petroleum products.
Hits and detonations have been recorded in the area where the facility is located. The Ukrainian Defense Forces are systematically taking measures to reduce the combat potential of Russian occupation troops and destabilize their logistics capabilities, including disrupting the supply of fuel and lubricants, as well as forcing Russia to end its armed aggression against Ukraine. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram,
such strikes on Russian oil refineries are no longer uncommon. Since the beginning of August, Ukrainian drones have also struck oil refining facilities in Saratov, Novokybyshevsk, Ryazan, Ukhta, and the village of Afipsky in the Krasnodar region. According to the consulting company S&AMP Winkworth Sticking Out Global, just in the past week, facilities with a combined capacity of 1.5 million barrels per day have been damaged. According to the Financial Times, some of these Russian plants may be out of commission for a long time, or even permanently. Among them is the Novoshakhtinsk oil products plant, which burned for several days as a result of the strike.
Units of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Unmanned Systems, in coordination with other components of the Defense Forces, struck the Novoshakhtinsk oil products plant. Rostov Region, Russian Federation. It is one of the largest suppliers of petroleum products in southern Russia. It participates in supplying the Russian armed forces. The total tank capacity is over 210,000 cubic meters. From a statement by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Telegram,
it turns out that every successful attack on Russian oil refineries is not just a picture on social media, but a real hole in the energy balance of the aggressor country. Proof of this is the fuel crisis in the Federation. Lines are forming at gas stations in Zabaykalsky Krai. The situation is even worse in Primorsky Krai and in Crimea, which is occupied by Russia. There, according to media reports, gasoline is being distributed with ration cards. Local authorities justified the shortage by citing increased consumption during the holiday season and delays or reductions in gasoline deliveries. They are not in a position to reveal the real reason.
According to the broker, at least 10% of Russia's refining capacity has been taken out of operation. Strikes on the railway infrastructure in the central part of the country have made the situation worse, causing train delays and disruptions in fuel deliveries. To contain the price increase, the authorities of the Russian Federation completely banned gasoline exports on July 28. But even that wasn't enough to effectively meet domestic demand. From a Financial Times publication,
foreign observers note that the tactics of Ukraine's defense forces are working and delivering tangible results. Russians themselves could tell you even more about this. Fuel shortages inside the country are immediately reflected in price tags and lead to a record surge in fuel costs. According to Russian media, since the beginning of the year, AI-92 gasoline has increased in price by a third, and AI-95 by half. With every new attack, a few more rubles are added to the bill at the gas station, turning a routine visit to the pump into a test of patience and your wallet. And as gasoline prices rise, it's only natural that all consumer goods become more expensive as well.
Ukraine is focusing its drone attacks on oil refineries, pumping stations, and fuel trains, trying to inflict damage on the Russian war machine. From a CNN report.
Starting March 1st, Russia restricted gasoline exports, and then went further by announcing a complete ban on selling it abroad until the end of August. Before that, the restrictions mainly applied to traders, small refineries, and oil depots. Large producers were allowed to sell fuel abroad, but rising prices on the domestic market forced the Kremlin to extend the ban to them as well. Now the government intends to extend the full ban on gasoline exports until the end of September. This proposal from the Ministry of Energy was supported by Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak on August 14. Officially, the decision is explained as caring for the domestic market, but in reality, it leads to a paradox. A country that has prided itself for decades on sitting atop oil and gas is now forced to manually restrict exports just to keep its own drivers from facing empty gas pumps.
Novak supported the Ministry of Energy's proposal to extend the ban on gasoline exports through September, including for producers, and through October for non-producers of petroleum products. This is supposed to be done to maintain stability in the domestic fuel market during the peak demand season and agricultural fieldwork. From Russian media publications.
Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service confirms the fuel crisis in Russia is getting worse. In order to at least partially meet demand, Russian authorities have had to urgently purchase fuel from Belarus. According to the Belneftekhim concern, in the second half of August, Russian companies' interest in Belarusian petroleum products increased sharply. Minsk oil refineries are quickly ramping up deliveries, trying to meet buyers' demands. For Lukashenko, this is an extra opportunity to profit from his neighbors' problems, since the Russian crisis turned out to be a great excuse to sell fuel at a good price and without competition. In Russia itself, the fuel situation is getting worse. After occupied Crimea, Zabaykulsky Krai, and Primorai, the Kuril Islands in Sakhalin Oblast have also faced a gasoline shortage. On August 20th, they introduced fuel sales limits there, no more than 10 liters per person. Gasoline will be given on a priority basis only to special and emergency services, as well as to enterprises that support the region's vital functions. For the local population, these limits have become yet another confirmation that the fuel crisis in Russia is gaining momentum. From a publication by the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine on the agency's website. Since the beginning of the year, drone attacks have knocked out facilities capable of processing millions of tons of oil. Losses for Russian companies are already estimated in the billions of dollars. Russia simply cannot protect all of its oil refineries. Most of the facilities are located in the European part of the country, within range of Ukrainian drones. However, the experience of recent months has shown that even sites deep inside Russian territory are not immune to successful attacks by Ukrainian drones. As a result, the Kremlin has found itself facing a contradiction. The war that Russia started against Ukraine has turned into a systemic economic crisis for the aggressor. Billions in company losses, record prices at gas stations and in stores, fuel limits for ordinary citizens. All of this is a direct result of Putin's decisions. The war against Ukraine is destroying Russia, and that's already a fact. In essence, Putin has brought Russians exactly what he promised to protect them from: serious losses of resources on the front lines and in their wallets.